Chapter 6 Blind to Failure. When Eric Wehenmeyer arrived that afternoon, expedition leader Pasquale Scatero began to have misgivings. They were starting their climb of Mount Everest, and Eric, the reason for the whole trip, was stumbling into Camp 1, bloody sick and dehydrated. He was literally green, says fellow climber Michael O'Donnell. He looked like George Foreman had beaten the crap out of him. The beating had actually been an accident. Eric had stepped into a crevice, and as his partner reached to help him, his climbing pole raked Eric across the nose and chin. Now, as Eric lay exhausted in his tent, the rest of the team gathered in a worried huddle. It had taken 13 hours, not the allotted 7, to make it from base camp through Khumbu Icefall to Camp 1. That person shouldn't be out here, he thought. Maybe he shouldn't be out here wandering through an ice field, measuring the distance over a 6-meter deep crevasse with climbing poles and then leaping literally over into the unknown. Eric's qualifications were being tested on this mountain. A typical assault on Everest requires each climber to do as many as 10 traverses between base camp and Camp 1 through the icefall, both for acclimatization and to help carry the immense amount of equipment for an ascent. The rest of the 13-member National Federation of the Blind team discussed his staying at Camp 1, listening to tapes, while they and the Sherpas carried his gear. "No way," said Eric. He wasn't going to be carried to the top and spiked like a football. Scatero said that it turned out that climbing Mount Everest with Eric wasn't that different from climbing with a sighted mountaineer. A teammate attached a bell to his gear, and Eric followed the sound, scuttling along using his custom-made climbing poles. His partners shouted out helpful descriptions like "death fall half a meter to your right, big crevasse to your left." Eric was so fast, though, that one of his partners has scars from being jabbed by Eric's poles when he slowed. Still, many pros wouldn't go near Eric's team, fearing they might have to hold the blind guy down. Everyone was saying Eric was going to have an epic 11, says Charlie Mace, a member of the film crew. That's mountaineering slang for disaster. Another climber planned to stay close, reportedly boasting that he would get the first picture of the dead blind guy. As the team ventured higher up Everest, oxygen deprivation and other factors began to do strange things to their bodies. Heart rates increased, brain function declined, blood thickened, intestines went haywire. They knew that bad ideas could inexplicably pop into their heads, especially above 7,500 meters. Ironically, Eric had some advantages as they closed in on the peak. For one thing, all the climbers wore goggles and oxygen masks, restricting their vision so severely that they could not see their own feet, a condition that Eric was used to. In addition, the final push for the summit would begin in the evening, so most of the climb would be undertaken in pitch darkness, illuminated only by headlamps. On May 24th, when Eric and the team began the final ascent from Camp 4, a place he describes as Dante's Inferno, with ice and wind, they had been on the mountain 2 months. They tried for the summit once, but turned back because of bad weather. At more than 8,800 meters, the peak is in the jet stream, where winds can easily exceed 160 km, and what from sea level looks like a cottony wisp of cloud can actually be a killer storm. With only 7 days left in the climbing season, most of the expedition knew this was their last shot. That's why, when Eric and Chris Morris reached the balcony, at some 8,000 meters, they were terribly disappointed when the sky lit up with lightning and snow driven by fierce winds. "We're done," Eric thought. By the time base camp radioed that the storm was passing, Eric and his team were coated in snow and ice. Inspired by a possible break in the weather, they pushed on. Looking like astronauts walking on some kind of Arctic moon, the climbers moved slowly because of fatigue from their huge puffy down suits, backpacks with oxygen canisters and regulators and goggles. With a fall of more than 3,000 meters into Tibet on one side and 2,300-meter drop into Nepal on the other, the South Summit, at about 8,750 meters, is where many climbers finally turn back. The roughly 180-meter-long knife-edge ridge leading to the Hillary Step consists of ice, snow and fragmented shale, and the only way to cross it is to take small steps, anchoring your way with an ice axe. Eric could feel the rock chip off, hear it fall into the void. Finally, as they reached the Hillary Step, the 17-meter rock face that is the last major obstacle before the summit, the weather cleared. Eric clambered up the cliff, belly flopping over the top. "I celebrated with the dry heaves," he joked, and then he walked 40 minutes up a sharply angled snow slope to the summit. On May 25th, Eric Wehenmeyer conquered the Killer Peak, proving that he ranks among the world's best mountaineers. It could be called the most successful expedition ever. In all, a record 19 climbers from Eric's group succeeded that day. "Look around," teammate Jeff Evans told the blind man as they savored being on top of the world. "Just take a second and look around." Summiting Everest, Eric says, is probably the greatest experience of his life. There are summits everywhere. You just have to know where